bearing with us while I figure this out. Panels in the time of COVID, but let's get started. I just want to say hi to everybody out there. Thank you very much for joining us for this discussion of the Dissident. I'm Alex Marquardt. I'm the senior national security correspondent for CNN here in Washington, D.C. I'm a former Middle East correspondent as well, which I only mentioned because it might help explain my deep interest in the subject that we're about to discuss this afternoon. Now, the Dissident is, of course, the terrific documentary from Oscar-winning director Brian Fogel about the murder of Jamal Khashoggi and Saudi Arabia's targeting of activists around the world, one of whom you can see right there, Omar Abdulaziz. He joins us today. We're also going to be joined by a producer on the film, Thor Halvorsen, who is the founder of the Human Rights Foundation. As we get started, I just want to thank the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission for asking me to moderate this discussion. This is a subject that I've spent a lot of time reporting on over the past few years. It's a subject that most recently has gotten a lot of attention with the release of the intelligence community's unclassified report on the horrific killing of Jamal Khashoggi in October of 2018. It's a report, as many of you watching will know, that was required by law. That law was ignored by the Trump administration. This report was then put out by the Biden administration, and it stated in no uncertain terms that the operation against Khashoggi in Istanbul was approved by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. Now, how to hold MBS and Saudi Arabia to account for his murder and for continued human rights abuses is one of the major foreign policy questions of the day, particularly in the early days of a new administration. It's something that the members of Congress who are joining us today have been wrestling with since Joe Biden took office and since before he took office, I should say, and they continue to push for. We have a number of terrific speakers today who know these issues very well, who are very passionate about them. And I know that many of you listening also have questions. We're definitely going to get to those questions for the panelists. You can put them in the Q&A section of this Zoom call. And as we get started, I just want to give the opportunity to a number of the members who are joining us today to give some introductory remarks. They're going to be Congressman Gregory Meeks, the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman James McGovern, the co-chair of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, and Congressman Tom Malinowski, the vice chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Chairman, why don't you kick us off? And sir, I believe you're muted.
There you go. Got to remember those technological things. So I just want to say thank you, Alex, and good evening, everyone. And I want to especially thank Director Brian Fogel and producer Thor Halvorsen, and of course the Saudi activist Omar Abdulaziz. I really deeply appreciate this opportunity to discuss their work and an important issue that we've been focused on as a committee and indeed as Congress. My role as chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I have several priorities, but none more important than restoring U.S. leadership on human rights and democratic freedoms worldwide, including at home, and ensuring accountability in our relationships with our partners. And this is a very impressive and courageous film, The Dissident, which shines important light on the actions of one such U.S. partner, Saudi Arabia. And, you know, Saudi Arabia is a long-standing U.S. partner in a complex region, but nonetheless, for far too long, Saudi Arabia's routine suppression of basic rights and free expression and political dissidents have gone unaddressed. And though Saudi Arabia has taken some steps toward reform, recent years have been marred by the Saudi government's brutality against dissidents, most notably the detention and abuse of numerous peaceful protesters and the brutal killing of Washington Post journalist and U.S. resident Jamal Khashoggi. As the documentary depicts in clear and striking cinematography and firsthand footage and testimonials, the Saudi government continues to pursue, threaten, and intimidate dissidents and civil society activists, both within the kingdom, but also in other countries, such as in Europe and Canada. So it's long past time for the United States to address these abuses and make it clear business as usual is over as long as such actions continue. So we've been active as a committee in addressing this, and we're joined here by members that have been active in pushing forward steps for accountability, like the Lantos Human Rights Commission, chaired by my friend and colleague, Jim McGovern, and the vice chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman Tom Malinowski. So I look forward to our conversation. And again, I deeply appreciate and respect the courageous work of Brian, Thor, and others who made the Dissident possible, and the courageous work of Omar and other Saudi civil society activists in the life and memory of Jamal Khashoggi. So with that, I guess I'll turn to Congressman McGovern for his remarks.
Thank you very much. I want to thank my colleague Gregory Meeks, and I'm honored to be with him and Tom Malinowski, two champions for human rights. I want to thank the filmmakers, and I want to thank all those who are on the panel. Look, this film documents what we already know, that Saudi Arabia has committed horrific abuses and violations of human rights and has faced virtually no accountability. I, like many of my colleagues, am convinced that Jamal Khashoggi's brutal murder was approved at the highest levels of the Saudi government. President Biden deserves credit for the declassification of the ODNI report assessing the Saudi government's role in the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. Biden also deserves credit for sanctioning 76 Saudi individuals who threatened dissidents overseas, including but not limited to those involved in the Khashoggi killing. We have all condemned what's happened, but we have to ask, what more can we do? Our high-profile relationship with Saudi Arabia, given the lack of accountability for the abuses the regime commits, undermines U.S. credibility as a defender of human rights across the globe. I believe it is time to evaluate all aspects of the U.S.-Saudi relationship, beginning with ending U.S. arms sales. For a long time, oil was the main reason why the United States fostered such close ties with the government of Saudi Arabia. Now, as our economy moves towards green and renewable energy, we have to ask ourselves, what are we getting out of the alliance and at what cost? We must also continue to call for the release of all those unjustly detained by the Saudi government for exercising their fundamental human rights. Raif Badawi, founder of the website Free Saudi Liberals, is among those who have been imprisoned for years. I've met with his wife on many occasions. He has young children. It is a miscarriage of justice that he is in prison simply because the current leadership in Saudi Arabia doesn't like his views. In the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, we have a Prisoners of Conscience campaign, and Raif is the prisoner of conscience that I have adopted. So today I renew my call for his immediate and unconditional release. And again, this is an important film. I hope everybody who is joining with us tonight will download this film and watch it. But the time has come to reassess our policy towards Saudi Arabia. And with that, I thank you for having me here. And I'm now honored to yield to my distinguished colleague from New Jersey, who is an expert on human rights, the Honorable Tom Malinowski.
Thank you, Chairman McGovern, Chairman Meeks. Thanks to the filmmakers, of course, and to Omar and to everybody who's joined us. We're all here because we agree that the murder of Jamal Khashoggi was a uniquely horrible crime. And it was shocking, not just because of the brutal nature of the crime, but because it was not committed inside Saudi Arabia. It's bad enough that the Saudi government imprisons and tortures its own people, dissidents who criticize the government and the royal family within Saudi Arabia. It's even worse when the government has the arrogance to reach beyond its borders into the United States, into Europe, into Canada, thinking that it can punish people who are under the protection of democratic countries around the world. And of course, Saudi Arabia is not the only country that has been brazen enough, the only dictatorship that has been brazen enough to go to such lengths, literally such lengths, to silence its critics. And so this is a fundamental human rights issue, but it's even something more. This is about the United States saying that you can't do that to people who are inside the United States. That is not something that a country that claims to be an ally of the United States can do and maintain the status of ally and friend. So a number of us have been working together following President Biden's announcement to find an appropriate way to hold the ultimate author of this crime, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, accountable. And with Chairman Meek's help, we moved legislation through our committee recently. The Senate is working on a similar bill. Congressman McGovern was one of the original sponsors of our bill in the House as well. And I'm confident that we will be able to do the right thing in the United States Congress to signal to Saudi Arabia that, we're not always going to protect this relationship from the consequences of your misbehavior. Like, the burden has to be on you, not just on us, to protect this relationship. And in the meantime, the film, I think, serves as a kind of justice in and of itself. It's not formal justice, it's not legal justice. We need those things. But the film being out there and being seen by millions of people around the world, it is a form of justice. It reminds the perpetrators of this crime that the crime will follow them for the rest of their days. That when we look upon them, we will always look upon them as killers. And that is important. It's tough, but it's important and it is appropriate. So I'm grateful to the filmmakers for not just making a film, but making such a good film that is winning such respect and such applause around the world. And with that, yield back and look forward to any questions that folks may have.
I've never been yielded to by a congressman, but I'll take it. I also just want to recognize that we have two other representatives, Sheila Jackson-Lee and Representative Dean Phillips, also joining us today. I want to move on to the filmmakers, and we are still waiting for Thor, who is a producer on the film, to join us. But we have with us one of the main characters in the film, Omar Abdulaziz, as well as, of course, the director, Brian Fogel. Just by way of introduction, Omar is a Saudi political activist. He's living in exile in Canada. He has a satirical news show on YouTube. He was a friend of Jamal Khashoggi's and is the recipient of the Human Rights Foundation's Prize for Creative Dissent. Brian won the 2017 Oscar for Best Documentary Feature for his film Icarus, which is a film I love. It's a wild story about doping in sports and in Russia in particular. He then turned around and set his sights on another repressive country and its strongman leader, Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. Brian, I want to start with you. As I mentioned, huge fan of Icarus, but it's a very, very different kind of documentary. Can you talk about what got you interested in Khashoggi's story? What made you see it as a documentary that needed producing, and then how you went about convincing people to talk to you?
Well, I in the post Icarus, which that journey was about 4 years in the making, and being awarded the Oscar in March of 2018, I was trying to figure out what my next film was going to be, and I had this checklist in my mind. I wanted a story that involved freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of journalism, was international, that I felt would have importance, it would have resonance. I didn't want my follow-up project to be, a Disney film. And very sadly for the world, in those first 2 weeks of October 2018, I think so many of us were riveted and appalled and shocked and fascinated by this horrendous crime and murder of Jamal Khashoggi in the consulate in Istanbul. And as the story continued to break and unfold, those kind of light bulbs went off into my head as I started reading about who Jamal was and what he was writing about, and started reading first his writings in the Washington Post. Then I brought on a couple Arabic speakers to start doing research for me about Jamal. and everything about him felt like someone that I would have liked. It felt like someone that I would have wanted to defend, and what he was speaking about were values and ideals that I held true. And at the same time, the story was breaking about Omar Abdulaziz in Canada, who's joining us, and how he had been hacked using Israeli cybersecurity software Pegasus, and that this hack and Jamal had been hacked as well. Omar felt directly led to Jamal's murder. And so all of a sudden there was this murder, there was a protagonist in Omar. And then of course you had Hatice Cengiz, his fiance in Istanbul, who was waiting for him outside the consulate. And that was the love story that, for me in my filmmaker mind, that was the way into the story to have an emotional connection to Jamal. And the question really became is, could I gain the trust of Omar and Hatice, which I viewed as 100% necessary if I was going to embark on the journey of making this film. And then ultimately the government of Turkey and the Turkish authorities and police and investigators to present this story in a way that was well beyond the news headlines and well beyond what you would see on CNN and BBC. And that whole process of building trust was months in the making. And then, I really embarked on the journey of making the film. And, I'm very, very happy that I did. And I'm honored to be in this conversation right now, that the work is having an impact, that members of Congress are watching it. Because I made the film for Omar Abdulaziz, who's on this call, and Hatice Cengiz, but also for the so many hundreds and thousands of Saudi political prisoners that remain imprisoned in Saudi Arabia due to this, the brutality of Mohammed bin Salman's regime.
Thanks, Brian. Omar, I'm wondering to what extent, since this film has come out, what impact do you think it has had, not just in terms of teaching the general public and about what happened in Istanbul to Khashoggi and detailing that whole episode, but raising awareness about Mohammed bin Salman and his efforts, and generally Saudi efforts against you personally and fellow activists?
Thank you, everybody. It's been 2 years, 8 months, 8 days, 6 hours since Mohammed bin Salman and his squad arrested and jailed my brothers and friends, and 2 years, 6 months, and 6 days since they killed Jamal Khashoggi. Simply by doing that, they were trying to send the message to every single activist or dissident that we're coming after you, and you're not going to be safe. So many people are saying today that maybe the behavior of the Saudi government has changed. They've learned their lesson, but it's not happening. A few weeks ago, one of our friends who was here in Canada, who was granted asylum, he was dragged to a Saudi embassy in Ottawa. And then he called us from there. He said, I'm really scared. Something bad would happen. Please come, please do something to help me out. And suddenly he disappeared. A few days later, we learned that this person is in Saudi Arabia. So since that time, I'm really happy. I'm really glad that so many people have watched the film, enjoyed the story, learned about what's really happening in Saudi Arabia. But and also, I'm really glad that the Biden administration has released the report, which is a very important step. But till now, I do have the feeling that Mohammed bin Salman still did not get the message clearly. And I do believe that lots of work has to be done to give him a lesson, not only sanctioning the people who are working with him, but I do believe that sanctioning him personally would maybe make some change.
Omar, how do you feel the film was received in Saudi Arabia among those who have seen it? I mean, it must be said that in some quarters, MBS is wildly popular for some of the liberalizing that he's done, and for being seen as a young, vigorous leader.
We're not against that. We were happy Jamal Khashoggi himself was saying that. He said, I'm really glad to see that, to see that happening in Saudi Arabia. But we could do that without killing anyone, without arresting thousands of people, torturing them, without arresting and jailing and torturing and harassing women rights activists like Lujain al-Hadloul and Samar Badawi and so on and so forth. And what we're looking for, Jamal once said something that we're looking for the minimum. We want just to speak freely, and this is not happening. And not only that, they don't want anyone to talk, to criticize the regime. In the same time, they're sending a clear message that if we're not going to harm you, we're going after your beloved ones, we're going after your family members and your friends. And this is what's really happening till now.
Brian, you premiered the film at Sundance. You had some pretty big names in the audience, and then you had some difficulty selling the film. And I was reading a quote from you earlier, and I've got it here. You said there was a unified front among the major global media companies, distributors, that they were not going to touch this film. Can you expand on how difficult it was, given how sensitive the subject was and it relating to Saudi Arabia, that it made for you as a filmmaker to get your film out there?
Well, first off, this film would have not happened if it wasn't for the Human Rights Foundation coming behind the film, financing the film, and giving me the freedom and bandwidth to be able to go on this journey to make the film. And so had I, needed to rely on traditional kind of methods of film financing, I don't believe this film would have ever saw the light of day. The journey of finding distribution for it has proven difficult. In regards to the film is available, it's on VOD right now. People can go and rent it for $6 across all the platforms in the US and Canada. It just launched in the UK on Amazon, and it's available streaming in other parts of the world. But it does not look like it will ever have a single global streamer, a universal way for everyone who has access to a streaming service to see the film. And it's disappointing because we wanted hundreds of millions, billions of people to have access to the film easily. I know that Omar has been pretty successful on getting it onto like BitTorrent sites where people in that part of the region can access the film for free should they go on these, whatever you want to call them. I don't know if I'd use the word illegal, but just alternative ways to watch content sites. And for me, that's fantastic. If everybody can watch the film for free, that's great. I would love that. But I think that the fight that the film had for distribution to have a global platform really just speaks to the conflicts of interest among these huge global companies between taking business, or pursuing business interests with the kingdom, taking investment from the kingdom, making investment in the kingdom, or growth, as companies, as well as all the various trade deals and security issues, rather than focusing on the human rights violations in this country and why it is important to distribute content like this, or why a business relationship needs to be reassessed. I think the same, has happened with the Biden administration to release that declassified report, or to declassify the intelligence report, release it, label Mohammed bin Salman as the killer, and then take no actual action against him or the kingdom, is sending the same message that we face in the distribution of the film. So, clearly, I think there's a very long way to go in holding the kingdom accountable for these violations.
And I want to ask Omar about that. We just heard Chairman Meeks say that it's no longer business as usual with Saudi Arabia. Omar, do you feel that way when it comes to the Biden administration? And how do you feel about the efforts that some of these folks on this panel are making?
I want to be realistic here, and I know that Saudi Arabia is a very important ally to the United States of America. So, but we have to distinguish between Saudi Arabia and Mohammed bin Salman. And I do believe that we do have other alternatives. And so I'm not a big fan of the House of Saud, but this is the reality that we live in. And by releasing and freeing some of them, I think some of them are imprisoned now too. So that would put more pressure on Mohammed bin Salman. Yes, we cannot lose Saudi, but at the same time, we cannot put lots of pressure to change the situation over there. I don't think that like it's really difficult sometimes to make a decision, you know, ethics there, politics there, and at the same time, some people are saying, okay, we want Mohammed bin Salman to be there. It's for the stability, but I do believe that Mohammed bin Salman is not only a threat to the Saudi people. He is a threat to the stability of the region. And if he's going to keep doing what he's doing, I do believe that we're having a new Saddam Hussein in the region.
Congressman Malinowski, you've been very outspoken for a while about MBS. Clearly, you felt that the response from the Biden administration following the release of the ODNI report didn't quite go far enough. Could you briefly explain to the audience how you did feel after what you saw the Biden administration was doing and what your legislation is now proposing?
I was very happy with what they did. I mean, I was happy that President Biden simply spoke the truth and told us what we all knew, but that something that was much more powerful coming from the President of the United States, from the United States government, that MBS was the author of this crime. I actually believe that under US law, that mere statement automatically has some consequences. There are all kinds of existing US laws that say, for example, that if the Secretary of State has credible evidence that a foreign government official has committed a terrible human rights abuse, then automatically that person is banned from entering the United States. So our legislation simply formalizes that consequence and makes clear that that it does apply even to the putative leader of Saudi Arabia, even if it is an ally of the United States. And so the effect would be that that there would be a visa ban applied to MBS, which the president could waive if it's very much in the US national interest, but we made that hard to do. We also asked for an examination of whether Saudi Arabia is continuing to try to threaten or intimidate people inside the United States. And if that's the case, there's actually another law that would prohibit arms sales to Saudi Arabia, a law that applies to every country in the world that may be trying to threaten, intimidate, kill people inside the United States. So, you know, in effect, giving the Saudis a chance to prove that this was never going to happen again, and indicating that there would be a consequence if it does. I think, you know, all of us, Chairman Meeks, Congressman McGovern, and I agree, we still have a relationship with Saudi Arabia. It's important to our interest. It's important to their interest. We should remember, but it's not a blank check, and it doesn't. The fact that we have this interest in cooperating with the Saudis in their own defense, by the way, is not a green light for the Saudis to come into the United States and kill somebody. And so we want to find an appropriate balance here. Thanks.
Thank you. I do just want to note that we are still having some technical difficulties in terms of getting Thor Halvorsen in here, but he was, as Brian was saying, a pivotal player in getting this film produced. As I mentioned, I think he founded the Human Rights Foundation in 2005, and they host the annual Global Human Rights Conference, which is called the Oslo Freedom Forum. And Halvorsen has actually produced several other films. Congressman Malinowski, Chairman Meeks, Congressman McGovern, I want to give you also an opportunity to ask our wonderful panelists any questions.
Well, this is Jim McGovern. I mean, I said in my opening statement that we do have to reevaluate. We should reevaluate our policy towards Saudi Arabia, because it's not just about what's happening in Saudi Arabia, it's about us as well. And the case of Jamal Khashoggi, I'm sad to say, is not unique. I guess my question would be specifically what actions do you think that we can take that might have a meaningful impact, that might change behavior or might help release the many people, the many prisoners of conscience who are in Saudi jails right now?
Omar, do you want to take that?
Omar, do you want to
Go
take
ahead,
that?
Brian.
I think that question is really best suited for Omar. For me as a filmmaker, I can only do so much, which is to present this story and the story of Omar and the story of Hatija as a piece of cinema for those to emotionally connect to hopefully have that feeling that a well-crafted film can do. But beyond that, my hands are kind of tied, and I think that's really up to members of Congress and Senate, members of the G20, and business leaders to make that change. But I would love to hear what Omar has to think in regards to what can be done that would be meaningful, especially as his brothers and his friends remain imprisoned 2.5 years onward.
Omar, do you want to pick up from there?
Sorry, I couldn't hear the question first, please.
Well, Congressman McGovern was asking simply what more can be done.
Okay, what happened a few days ago that the State Department released a report about human rights violations in Saudi Arabia, and few days later, then the Saudi regime sentenced an activist for almost 20 years. So I honestly, I felt like they're just challenging the administration, or they're just sending a message that okay, we really don't care that much, and we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. I do believe that if we put more pressure on Mohammed bin Salman and his administration, and we send them a clear message that those mistakes or these mistakes should not be repeated again, that would change so many things. Till now, we're talking about Samar Badawi, Mr. Walid Abul Khair, Mia Zahrani, Shadan Al-Anizi, so many activists, so many political activists and human rights activists still in jail. And I'm really happy to see that Lujain Al-Hadlul is free, but we have to do more. We have to put more pressure on Mohammed bin Salman. Honestly, the strongest thing is releasing the royals. That's going to put a huge pressure on him, and that would send him a clear message that you are not the only option there. We have other alternatives.
Brian, I'll ask a question of Brian. Your film, I know we're trying to get it seen here in the United States. I'm a firm believer in multilateralism and working with other countries, etc., because it's so impactful. It could be more than just the United States making a statement, even though Mr. Khashoggi was a resident of the United States, but to draw in other countries also to work in conglomeration with what we're doing. So are you able to distribute, or internationally or worldwide? Are you getting any reception in that regards, and what kind of feedback that you're getting from the entire international community?
Well, the film just launched in the United Kingdom. about a week ago, so it can be seen on Amazon there. It's on some other platforms in France and Spain, Germany, a handful of other countries. France, critically, from the critics, we've received, really incredible reviews. The film's nominated for the British Academy Award, which is this Sunday, the BAFTA. So that would be a real honor, and I think also help bring eyes to it. But I think it's about having a lot more screenings on an international level with people such as yourself that are in a position to actually call for legislative change, that are in a position to call for sanctions, because I think what we've seen and Chairman, as you saw in the film, as Hatija addresses the United Nations Human Rights Council, which the United States is currently not a member of, that Trump withdrew the United States during his administration. The Saudi delegation stood up and walked out. I mean, that was real. That happened. Our cameras were there to capture that. And yet here the United Nations failed to take any action. The Security Council, Gutierrez, turned down Agnes Calamar's, comprehensive report into the murder. And so, here you have, the United Nations themselves not wanting to pick up this case. So, I think it's about getting more business leaders and leaders such as yourself and members of Congress and Senate and certainly in Europe, countries that are doing business with the kingdom, Germany, France, the United Kingdom, others, hopefully to see this film and use this as that kind of call to action as to how to reassess that relationship and what sanctions to impose and how to better police the kingdom. Myself being not a politician, that's the best assessment that I can make.
Yeah, this is Jim McGovern, I could just interject a little bit. I think it's always a mistake to rely too much on the politicians, because quite frankly, I think a lot of turning a blind eye to human rights abuses in Saudi Arabia is because there are powerful business interests and political interests that don't want to change the status quo, no matter what the human rights situation is. So one of the reasons why I appreciate this film is it helps create a sense of urgency and hopefully a sense of activism for people to pressure their politicians and to pressure this administration to do more. That human rights ought to be a centerpiece of U.S. foreign policy. That's what our values should be about. And when we turn a blind eye or when we do not take action in the face of not only what happened to Jamal Khashoggi, but so many others, a continuation of turning a blind eye means that we are complicit. So I appreciate this film because it is helping to raise awareness, and I hope it's helping to get people to turn their disgust into political action. But thank you.
Just want to remind the general audience that you are welcome to submit questions in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to get to those in just a second. Brian, if I could ask you to pull back the curtain a little bit. In addition to Omar and Hatija, in terms of the voices in your film, you had very strong participation, it seemed, by Turkish officials, prosecutor, intelligence. Why were they so eager to participate?
Obviously, Turkey has its own human rights issues. There are journalists jailed there. Erdogan is certainly a strong man. But in the making of this film, I made a conscious decision, and the decision was I was going to stay focused on the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, and in this particular instance, Turkey has and remains on the right side of history. They're the only country truly in the world that not only has investigated this crime, tried to hold those accountable for it, held a trial in absentia, and regardless of whatever political motivations might be, they might be accused of, they have not wavered in their desire to hold Saudi Arabia accountable for this murder. And I say that because as I set out to make the film, there was so much trust that had to be built with the Turkish government. And I said to them over and over again, I said, look, if you help me in providing evidence and providing information and providing keys to your investigation, the transcript, the police footage, interviews, all that stuff that you see in the film, I said, you have my word that I'm not going to disparage Turkey, because this was not the film for that. And over months and months of trust building, the Turks said, okay, we trust you, and the easing of evidence and more access was granted, and that relationship built. And what I put forward, those Turkish officials that speak, you're not going to find those interviews anywhere else, nor will you find that police footage or the transcript, because that was completely unreleased, other than to intelligence agencies. And there was a point where Turkey actually offered me, about a year in, pieces of the audio. And I made a decision not to take those or to put those in the film, because I thought it would be gratuitous. I didn't want Omar or Hatija or those that love Jamal or Jamal's family or his friends to ever have to hear that. And I also didn't feel like it was necessary to the evidence put forward in the film and what we already know to be true.
Brian, that's an excellent point that people need to understand, is that the intelligence services, the Turkish intelligence services, had recordings from inside the consulate. And that is why we know so much about how this murder went down. That is why we have so much detail from the UN Special Rapporteur. This is why, to some extent, the US intelligence community has assessed with high confidence the roles of the various Saudis on the ground and that of MBS. We also know, according to public reports, that CIA Director Gina Haspel went over to Turkey and listened to those recordings herself. Did you get any help from the US intelligence community, from the CIA or ODNI, in terms of the details that you included in your film?
I did not. I did interview former CIA Director John Brennan, did interview Anthony Ferrante, who was former head of White House cybersecurity. You see them both appear in the film. And Agnes Callamard, the UN Special Rapporteur, who authored the report on his murder to the United Nations, and worked with both Turkish and US intelligence agencies in authoring that report and her investigation. So there was work done in that regard. But I relied on the Turks and their evidence, and clearly I think what you see from them is they led a pretty extraordinary investigation, from all of the closed circuit surveillance cameras all over Istanbul that they were able to piece together the crime and the body double, to the footage inside the consul general's house, the tandoor oven, the discovery of the order of 70 kilograms of meat right after his murder from a well-known steakhouse, because they are 99.9% certain that he was cremated in that tandoor oven. On top of the audio recordings that they were able to capture in the media room of that consulate, which I think pretty much paints an open and closed case. So I didn't feel the need to push on US intelligence, because that was really secondary to what the Turks had already uncovered and exposed.
And for anybody who really is interested in this subject, that public report from Agnes Callamard at the UN, then at the UN, is possibly the most comprehensive public report out there. She has since been named the Secretary General of Amnesty International. I'd like to bring in, we're going to open this up to the Q&A, and I first want to go to Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, who I believe is there. Congresswoman, are you there?
I am there. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Yes, we can hear you.
I am sorry I am traveling, but I have been able to listen to this very provocative and important discussion. Thank you, and to thank Chairman McGovern. I am a longtime member on the Tom Lantos Commission, and certainly a person who worked directly with Tom Lantos and continue to be impressed by and guided by his deep abiding commitment to weeding out the vileness of human atrocities. Brian, you have provided us with more than a description of what could be called the crime of the century, the crime of the last decades, but it is certainly an international crime that I think will not be forgotten. The last words I heard would appall any decent human being of any persuasion, and that is a nearby steakhouse may have been the place where Khashoggi was cremated. But the other part of it is the actual dismembering of another human being. I've considered one of the vilest violations of someone's humanity, no matter what faith they might be in. So first of all, thank you for doing that. And it keeps us constantly engaged as to how we get justice for Khashoggi, which I don't believe we've gotten. But I'd make this comment on the question of justice. You have touted Turkey in being transparent. They were the first voices and discoverers of this vicious and vile murder. I continue to think of Khashoggi's family members. So my question to you is, what would be the next steps as it relates to the Crown Prince? And could there be is there any legal action that has gone on through Turkey, either through its own system of justice or through the international forums that the various nation states are able to participate in? And as you answer that, what steps you would like the United States Congress to take? Thank you, from your perspective in doing this film. Thank you so very much. This has been very, very instructive.
Thank you. Thank you, Congresswoman. I remember that you were in attendance when Hatice Cengiz came to speak in Washington to the Human Rights Subcommittee.
Yes, I was. Yes, thank you.
And we were there to film that day and the reception afterwards. So thank you very much. You know, again, I think that it's really up to governing bodies of the world to commit to action. You know, while Representative Malinowski, we met when I was in Washington, and you met with Hatice, and thank you very much for that. There's even a shot of you in the film. But I personally don't feel that the Biden administration is doing enough. And I think that it was a great first step forward. But, Omar's brothers and his friends still remain in that prison. And while Loujain al-Hatul was freed, arguably as kind of a peace offering, I believe, to the Biden administration, there are so many others that remain imprisoned. And I believe without very strong, actions taken, and again, I'm not a member of Congress or that am able to impose those actions, that the message is that murders like this ultimately will be tolerated. And this is the same message that has been sent to Putin's Russia. If you look at even in the poisoning of Navalny and his imprisonment there, that I think there is an understanding among authoritarian regimes that ultimately behavior like this will be tolerated because the relationships with their foreign allies or adversaries are too important to jeopardize or trade or the financial interests. So, Representative Lee, I guess the answer to the question is I don't really know the inner workings of how the government works, but I don't believe that there has been enough action, because if there had been, Omar's brother's 2.5 years into sitting in a Saudi prison with no charges against him, and his friends, among countless others, would have their freedom right now. And I would again ask Omar what can be done.
Honestly,
Thank you. Omar, sorry,
Right.
let me yield to you.
Yeah.
Omar.
Yeah, I've read that Congresswoman Ilhan Omar has introduced a new bill regarding or about sanctioning Mohammed bin Salman. I hope that the majority would vote yes, and again that would put lots of pressure on him. Yes, maybe politicians, they do have their work, they have their way, but I also believe that the media should play a major part there. People like Brian and also other activists around the world. And also we have to send a clear message to those artists, actresses, Hollywood stars, that they should not do such a thing, such a business with Mohammed bin Salman, as long as he's doing what he's doing. I cannot rely on only one element, but I think so many people should play their role.
Omar, can I ask you a question from the audience?
Thank you so very much. Thank you. Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Congresswoman. We did see in the film, and it was terrific graphics, Brian, the troll army that would go after activists like Omar and others. So Omar, we have a question here. How does the Saudi government use bots and the internet to intimidate and silence dissent on social media? How does the Saudi government still do this today?
Well, honestly, I'm filing a lawsuit against Twitter, and I don't know, my words maybe I'm not going to help. But anyways, I do believe that Twitter till now did not do its work, and they're not helping. We've complained a lot. We've sent so many messages, and Brian also did, Thor also did, and I've asked so many activists around the world to help us out. Till now, Mohammed bin Salman and his team, they're using thousands of trolls just to try to control the local narrative. And not only that, like yesterday, they launched the hashtag against me. A few days ago, they launched the hashtag against Logic. It's okay for me, criticizing me is a good thing, but not threatening people, not allowing them to threaten others, that you're going to be killed, you're the next. Yesterday, there was actually a journalist, I think she's from the States, if I'm not mistaken, but she's pro-Saudi. It's her decision. So she said, okay, you know what? You're going to be the next. Like what happened to Jamal, it's going to happen to you because you're playing with dangerous people. That was her tweet, and it's still there. So I think that someone should tell Twitter, you have to do your part, you have to do your work, because still now we are suffering from manipulating the hashtags and the trending in Saudi Arabia. Each country has its own trending section, and in Saudi Arabia, they still have their ways to manipulate that, to play with it, to take down wherever hashtag they want.
Thank you, Omar. We don't have a lot of time left, but Brian, I want to give you a question from the audience as well. And we have seen trials, if you will, take place in Saudi Arabia without much clarity, without much visibility and transparency. And so someone who's watching right now is asking, is there a possibility for the accused? And remember, there have been 18 names put out there by the US intelligence community to have an open trial in Turkey or to a neutral country like Switzerland.
I think that is incredibly unlikely. The kingdom has pushed back on any extradition requests. The trial that was held basically in anonymity. Members of the media and press were not allowed in to even know who was being tried and what had happened. The death sentences that were handed down were changed to really a handful of years in prison after Khashoggi's son Salah forgave the killers, arguably under pressure from the kingdom as the family lives there. So I don't think there is any realistic trial to be held. I don't think any of those people involved in the kill team will be leaving the country anytime soon. And then I think you really would need to even ask the question, well, of course, they committed this atrocity and this murder. They were acting under the orders, of the Crown Prince and Saud al-Qahtani. So, then you also kind of have to open up, yes, they committed the murder, but they were also acting from orders of the state. But I don't believe that we are going to be ever seeing a trial, or that there is any realistic trial in a international forum, be it Istanbul, The Hague, the United States. Other than that, in the future, I do think Interpol or the United States issuing whatever that's called, that if any members of that delegation or Mohammed bin Salman touches foot onto U.S. soil, that he would be put into custody, I think would send a pretty strong message.
Thanks, Brian. All right, we're gonna have to start wrapping up. But before we do, I wanted to give Congressman Malinowski and Chairman Meeks an opportunity to just close this out. Congressman Malinowski, do you have any more thoughts?
I just thank you guys for organizing this. Thank you, Chairman Meeks, for making this a committee event. I think that sends a really important signal in and of itself. And I'll end with where I started, which is that the movie is a form of justice. It will be hard, as Brian said, to have a trial, but there are many, many other ways in which good people and decent governments around the world can work together to ensure that the perpetrators of the crime continue to be held accountable. And I know we'll continue to do our part in the US Congress.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Meeks?
Thank you, Alex. Let me just say, I want to thank, of course, Brian and Omar. And I understand the responsibility that we have as members of Congress, the responsibility that I have as chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee. And we've got to do more, but that's why I'm really thankful to Congressman Malinowski for his bill, the Saudi Accountability for Gross Violations of Human Rights Act, which, as he said, puts visa sanctions on any Saudi officials that were deemed responsible or involved with the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. And also, Congressman Connolly had a bill that we were able to pass, which places limitations on the U.S. support to Saudi intelligence agencies and internal security involvement in human rights abuses and the repression of dissidents. These are the beginnings. These are the things that we're looking to do on the committee. And of course, as Brian has indicated, and Omar, we've got to work in the political process to try, because my hope is not just to get a bill passed out of the committee, but we have to work to get the bill passed on the floor of the House of Representatives and indeed the Senate, so that who we are and what we stand for in Congress, is a way to do it. I mean, these bills, I believe, together they provide a strong start way forward to Congress for Congress to position itself and make clear for accountability in our bilateral relationship with Saudi Arabia. So let me just say that. And again, everything that we've heard today only reinforces the need for the United States to ensure accountability for human rights abuses and stand up for democratic freedoms. So I look forward to working in my capacity as chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee with the Biden administration, further pursuing action in the line of our values, I also, need to want to say to and put a big hand out to the Lantos Human Rights Commission and its chair, Jim McGovern, who's also the chair of our Rules Committee, as well as Sheila Jackson Lee and other members who was on today. And of course, special thanks to all the viewers who've listened in today and were asking questions and moving forward, because without you, we don't get the forward progress that we need. And Alex, thank you for taking the time. You are deciding to moderate this panel and all that you do on a regular basis to expose what's taking place. We really thank you, Alex, for being a part of this. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this is obviously a critically important subject that we will all in our various capacities continue to shine a light on. So I just want to thank the House Foreign Affairs Committee, as well as the Commission for putting this together and for inviting all of us. Thank you to the Chairman, to Congressman Malinowski, to Congressman McGovern, who had to drop off, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, and of course the filmmakers. A real shame that Thor couldn't join us. But Omar Abdulaziz, for your profound thoughts and wishing you the continued good luck with all your work. Brian Fogel, of course, thank you for bringing what was a incredibly disturbing and important story to light for a much broader audience. Wishing all of you best of luck at the BAFTAs on Sunday. So thank you to everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for hosting this, and thank you to Omar and all the members of Congress. It means a lot, and it inspires me to continue to do work like this because this is very meaningful. So thank you all.
Thank you.